just to let you know that all evidence taken is protected by parliamentary privilege as provided by the Constitution Act, but also the standing orders of the Legislative Council. Therefore, any information that you provide during this hearing is protected by law. You are protected against any action for what you say during this hearing, but if you go elsewhere and repeat the same things, you may not have the same protection. Any deliberately false evidence or misleading of the committee may be considered. All evidence is being recorded. Hansard is listening in, and you'll be provided with a transcript, which I encourage you to have a look at. Ultimately, it will form part of the committee's report and will be made public on our website. If I could open the questions. Ms. Garlick, we heard from Ms. Rogerson last week, and Ms. Rogerson seemed to be of the opinion that iCook Foods over the many years was a well-run business, that it operated within the code, it operated well within the Food Act. In fact, it was a well-run business. Now, it would appear that you would disagree with that, and I'm wondering why you would find that Ms. Rogerson thought that the business was well run, but you found it to be very, well, obviously so badly run that it needed to be closed.
Well, I can certainly only speak of my experience and observations at the time that I attended. The very first time I attended the premises was on the 18th of February 2019, and my observations of the premises were such that there was cause for concern in relation to food safety, and those were reported to my immediate supervisor.
One of the points that you made, and photographs and points that you made in your reporting back, was around the water pooling. Now, my understanding, and certainly this was from Mr. Cook's evidence, was that those photos were taken straight after cleaning. So, of course, there would be some water there. Is that your understanding of when those photos were taken?
There were a number of times that photos of pooling water were taken. There were a number of occasions where there was cleaning happening, or in certain areas where cleaning may have happened. But with regard to structural requirements of food businesses, they are meant to have floors that are graded such that water does not pool even after cleaning. So you would not expect to see pooling water sitting about a premises.
Just in the few seconds I've got, Mr. Cook also confirmed that once a year they resurface and redo their floors, and that was going to happen, I think, in Easter, less than 4 weeks from your inspection. Were you aware of that?
Not that I recall.
Thank you. Dr. Q.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Garlick, for appearing again today. Could you take us through your obligations as a environmental health officer when you inspect, and also what step you should or you have taken to make sure that it is objective and rigorous in your investigation?
Yes, certainly. As part of our role, we are required to inspect premises for various number of reasons. They may be routine inspections, or they may be ones where we've received a complaint or a concern from either Health and Human Services. In order to be fair, I attend the premises, generally operate on any given day. During the inspections, I take the time to speak with the proprietors and gain an understanding of what is occurring, what type of food handling activities occur on the premises, and have discussions in relation to any concerns that I observe at the time, and generally work through some ideas with them on how they could perhaps be rectified.
Can you confirm, because of some of the other evidences or allegation, that the slug wasn't planted and the photo wasn't doctored or not?
No, the slug was not planted, and the photo was definitely not altered in any way. And I believe I've provided evidence and information previously in relation to that matter.
Thank you. Ms. Crozier.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Garlick. So you're telling the committee that the evidence provided the evidence provided by you in terms of the video was not doctored in any way?
Correct.
And you did not plant the slug?
No.
Right. Have you ever attended iCooks through production to see when they're operating, when they're producing food? Have you ever attended the facility?
Yes.
But you said the first time you went was on the 18th of February 2019.
That's correct. I observed food production on the 21st of February that same week.
Right. The day that they were closed down?
The morning of.
Right. Okay. Now, can I just go to the point again that you're saying that the photo that you gave to the cooks, or the council gave to the cooks for the criminal trial, was not doctored in any way? I just need to get that confirmed.
You can certainly have that confirmed. That photograph was not doctored in any way, and I think I've been fairly clear on that point.
But there was tissue in one part of some vision and then it was gone. So where did that tissue go?
I honestly can't tell you. There's debris in the photos I took, and there was no debris removed by me or by anyone else that I'm aware of.
So there's debris in one photo that you are saying existed, and then no debris in another photo, and you don't know how that happened except people saw you. We've been given evidence that saw you looking at the video and altering it.
There's 2 points you've raised there. Are you talking about photograph or video? I'll just need to clarify.
Well, I want to know both. I want to know if you've doctored any videos or any photographs.
So I don't know what you're referring to in relation to the evidence you've been provided, but I can be very clear there was no doctoring of evidence. And if you're speaking in relation to the photo, the physical photo that was provided to iCook as part of the prosecution brief initially, that was a photocopy or a printed copy of the photograph, which I do not believe reflected the digital copy in its resolution.
Thank you. Mr. Limbrick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Garlick, for appearing again. One of the issues around that they were closed down and food production was happening that morning that you observed. Had you been notified by DHHS that they were going to be closed down that day? Is that or was that something that was happening independent of you and you weren't aware of what was going on with that?
That was independent of me, and I certainly had not heard anything in relation to that.
So that announcement by Professor Sutton in the afternoon was something that hadn't been communicated to the council and was a surprise, I suppose, in that case.
I can't speak for the wider council, but I certainly didn't know about it. Right.
Okay. And is this announcement that came out, where they're talking about, you know, the connection to the patient that passed away, was that a surprise to you that connection was made?
I didn't have an opinion either way.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vagella.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Garlick, for your time today. Usually, what actions are taken by your council when the Department of Health notifies you of a case of listeria in the community?
Normally, we would do an inspection. We would be asked to follow up and investigate what is occurring at the premises. We'd also be instructed to advise the premises and the proprietor to conduct a listeria cleanup of their premises and to observe whether there's any potential cause or source of the listeria.
How is your assessment of public health risk influenced by the presence of genomic evidence, such as in this case, where the listeria isolated from the deceased was highly related to the strain found in 4 food items at iCook Foods?
I can't speak as to the genomic sequencing, but our primary role is to look for risks at the food premises and potential sources of contamination to the food products. So that's what I was looking for when I inspected.
So if that is the case, then do you think it would have been an acceptable risk for your council to allow iCook Foods to continue producing food for vulnerable people in health and aged care settings when there was knowledge of food safety compliance issues and there were positive detections of listeria at the premises?
Yes, I certainly can't speak as to the premises performance in the past, but in terms of what I was observing, I observed significant risks that I felt compelled to report to my senior officer.
Now, your council referred Kim Rogerson's allegations about misconduct and fabrication of evidence to the IBAC in May 2019. Are you aware of what was the outcome of that investigation and what evidence was considered as part of the Victoria's Ombudsman inquiry?
No, I'm not aware.
And just a quick one, Chair, if there's time.
No.
No,
Sorry.
okay, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lovell.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Garlick. Ms. Garlick, obviously it's very distressing for you to have your character questioned in this way, and I'm just wondering what support has been offered to you. Have council provided you with any media training or legal services advice to enable you to prepare to present to the committee?
No, other than what legal advice we'd received from the prosecution.
Can you just expand on that? What legal advice you got from the prosecution?
Well, generally as to what to prepare for a prosecution that occurs through the courts.
Okay, so this is when it was going to court, you were provided with legal counsel on how to present yourself in court?
And for the Supreme Court matter next year.
Right, terrific. Thank you very much. In the last inquiry, we heard evidence that when you arrived at iCook on the day, you had tissues protruding from your pockets, and I think we saw some security camera footage that confirmed that, which seemed to me a little bit strange for an environmental health officer because it didn't seem very hygienic to have all of those tissues protruding from your pockets. Is that a normal practice for you when you go out to inspect food premises, and why were those tissues in your pocket that day?
No, it would not be a normal practice, and I certainly do not recall having tissues in my pocket that day because it would not be normal for me to do so.
Right. Okay. We also heard evidence last time that you believed you'd been given the job or put onto iCook as their inspector because council wanted, and I can't remember whether it was, evidence of their premises not being up to standard or whether it was charges to be laid or something like that. Why did you get that feeling that you had been given the job in order to run a case against the iCook company?
I don't recall any such conversation, and I certainly didn't feel like I had been sent to iCook for any other reason than to investigate a listeria concern.
Thank you.
So,
Ms. Watt.
Thanks, Ms. Garlick. I just had a question about your day-to-day activities in your role and ask of you, have you witnessed the department working together with your council to administer the Food Act 1984 and the Australian New Zealand Food Standards Code? And then I've got some follow-ups relating to your answer to that.
Yes, certainly. So part of our day-to-day role would be to inspect food premises. If we have any questions or there's specific situations that we're not particularly sure about, we do have the ability to contact the Food Safety Unit at the Department of Health to seek clarification on particular matters.
Right. And do you think that there's a need for businesses that supply food to vulnerable cohorts such as immunocompromised people, people in a hospital setting, aged care, etc., to be held to a higher standard when it comes to the conditions of the manufacturing of the food?
I certainly don't have an opinion that is valid. However, the Food Act does have a higher level of responsibility for premises that do provide food to vulnerable people.
All right. Did you want to speak to that at all, about that higher standard?
Yes, certainly. that higher standard is that there is a lot more documentation required in relation to the food processes that are occurring on site. Premises are required to document their food handling procedures quite clearly and are required to be audited by a third-party auditor that's independent of council, and to make sure that their processes that are occurring on site are ultimately producing safe and suitable food.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vergela.
Yes, Chair. Ms. Garlick, why were formal legal directions issued to iCook Foods on 19 February, instructing them to improve the state of their premises, ensure their foods were safe and suitable for human consumption, and that all food handlers complete food safety training?
Why were those served? They were based on my observations from the 18th of February, and there were quite a few that specifically related to the premises and concerns around the knowledge of safe food handling practices for staff as well as cleaning practices. There were some significant concerns in relation to the availability for hand wash for the staff while they were preparing food. One particular basin in the high-risk area was not functional. So that Section 19 order was specifically to identify to iCook the items that needed to be addressed. Other such items included the cleaning practices that were occurring on site, because I observed some of those at the time of the inspection, and I observed the cleaning practices to be contaminating previously cleaned equipment. And those, in terms of a listeria notification, were of a significant concern.
So what evidence led you to reporting your supervisor, Ms. Johnson, that you didn't think that the listeria cleanup had been conducted to a satisfactory standard?
That would have been on the morning of Wednesday, the 20th of February, when I reattended the premises and found that there were still issues occurring on site in terms of the hand wash basin was still not functional in the sandwich production area. The cleaning practices were still being observed where staff were hosing down equipment in a way that sprayed water and debris onto nearby equipment. There were pieces of equipment that were in the food handling area that were of concern in terms of their structural integrity, also in the wash-up area.
Thank
and
you,
again,
Ms.
the
Garlick.
knowledge.
Thank you, Ms. Garlick. Mr. Ondaatje.
Thank you. Ms. Garlick, you said, why again was it you were carrying tissues when you went into the premises?
I didn't say I was, and I certainly wouldn't have been.
I thought you said to Ms. Lovell that you didn't recall.
No, I don't recall, but it wouldn't be my standard practice too.
I don't recall is an often used phrase in this state at the moment. People observed yourself and Ms. Johnson looking at a computer screen with some photos on there. Now, there's been some allegations about that. What were you doing?
If it was the time that was mentioned earlier, it would have been talking about video footage and the request from Media and Communications Department that they wouldn't be able to get the footage, private conversations removed as a response to the request that was mentioned earlier by Mr. Benny. And the request came to me from Ms. Johnson to assist with that process if I was able to, from Media and Comms.
Did anybody Photoshop the slug into a photo?
No.
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Garlick, the slug seems to be the main character in this investigation. And just further to those questions, last year when we were hearing evidence, we heard that the pest inspector and sort of expert in all things slug, I suppose, said that this would have been a very unusual sighting of such a specimen, that it was a nocturnal specimen, that it was not normally found at that time of year. And also when he checked the traps around the facility that those traps had been clear. Do you have any understanding why, how it would have got there? And in your experience, does that seem unusual?
Firstly, I'd like to make the point exceptionally clear that the slug was very low on my priorities list when I noticed it. I do have some thoughts as to where it possibly came from, the primary one being in the photographs that were taken of that area. Immediately to the left of that slug was a stack of wet food storage containers that were dripping, and based on that, I believe that the slug may have fallen off those, because in my further investigations and talking with Mr. Michael Cook at the time, he had shown me that there was an area outside in the parking area of iCook where they were washing down containers and food equipment. And when I observed that area, I did see evidence of that. There was also a ladle that was out laying in that area, which is bare concrete, and there was a hose present. So from that, I concluded that it may have fallen off those containers. I'd also observed exactly the same sort of container outside with debris in them, immediately outside the door next to where the slug was found.
Thank you. Ms. Watt.
Again, Ms. Garlick, I just have a follow-up question regarding last week. There were some claims made by Mr. Cook that all his staff had appropriate training, yet you seem to have observed otherwise. Were you provided with formal training records for all staff?
I do believe that was provided later, and we did have a food safety supervisor certificate provided to us, but that knowledge was not being demonstrated when I was present on site. I was not observing that knowledge, and that led to significant concerns.
Okay. With what you'd observed at iCook, is that of the standard you'd expect of a company involved in the manufacturing of food for people with potentially compromised immune systems in health and aged care settings?
No.
No. Anything more that you want to kind of add to that about the standards that you
expect to see an emphasis on proper cleaning practices, and I would expect to see staff demonstrating those cleaning practices. The level of cross-contamination that was occurring between areas when I observed them handling food on site was fairly significant. A chopping board without having washed it, so they were using it on some food. Then in order to clean it, they would spray it with sanitizer, give it one wipe down, and then go and use it on a different food. And that was in the sandwich production area. And there was, on one occasion, an ad hoc piece of equipment that had been made. I'd never fully found out what it was for, other than to be described as a scoop, but it had been made by cutting a plastic bucket into pieces, which had peeling plastic, and I thought that was quite strange to be in such a facility that was preparing high-risk food.
Thank you. Mr. Bark.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Garlick, for appearing before us. I was been interested by a range of different elements of your testimony. Certainly, by your new slug theory, with due respect, the idea that the slug might have slithered in from the crates outside along the concrete in the middle of the day seems about as likely as a short, sharp lockdown for a week in Victoria lasting less than a month. However, I'll take that as read, and we'll talk to some slug experts about whether that was likely. We all have our breaking point, Ms. Garlick, and this committee has heard sworn testimony about a culture of bullying and harassment at Dandenong Council. We've heard from one former employee in particular who very bravely has gone on the record about that. I certainly want you to know that from a personal perspective, if you were willing to talk to us about some of the pressure that you were placed under, certainly my view, and I don't doubt that I speak for other members of the committee, my view would be that any recommendation that we make or any finding that we make should deal with you with the utmost leniency, given the very strong and credible allegations that there are senior figures at Dandenong Council who are as crooked as a coat hanger. And so I'd ask you, Ms. Garlick, did anybody place pressure on you to plant that slug?
No.
All right. Well, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Flynn.
Sorry, Chair, me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, there was some noise. Thank you. Having have to go through what must be a very difficult time and challenging time for you with all the publicity allegations, for you and your colleagues, have you made any changes about the way you're going to work as a inspector, and from those past experience?
That is an interesting question. I've certainly done training in relation to risk assessment. I've always strived for continual improvement in my job. I don't believe that anything I did in relation to iCook was any different to what I would have done for any other premises. And that's probably what I've got to say on that.
Okay, so back to your past experience, what would be the typical or normal steps taken by the owners of a business being served with some of the notifications to address in comparison what iCook did, and what is typical time frame for a business to reopen?
Okay, I'll address the Section 19. Sorry?
Please,
okay.
Please continue.
Yes, in regards to the Section 19, I have issued those on a number of occasions prior. In most of those circumstances, we've seen immediate response to the items. The proprietors have been proactive in talking to council about different options as to how they can rectify the issues, different approaches. With regard to the response from iCook, they were not responsive. When I say they're not responsive, they spoke about being responsive, but the actions did not eventuate. On the Thursday morning when I went back, that hand wash basin was still not functional, and there were still cleanliness concerns present.
Thank you, Ms. Garlick. Mr. Limbrick.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back to Ms. Garlick, on the day that the order was given by Professor Sutton to shut down iCook Foods. You said that you went in that morning and you inspected and you had some concerns. Was any of that transmitted to DHHS, or would they not have been aware of any of that? What I'm trying to get at is anything that you saw there, would that have been taken into consideration by DHHS in their closure? Would there have been possible time for that to happen? Because I guess you would have to write reports and things, right?
That's possible. I wouldn't be able to speak to that in particular. I believe Officer Johnson would be able to shed more light on that. But I was aware that she had received and made phone calls to Department of Health while I was on site. Because of the concerns that were being observed.
Okay, so you're unsure whether that was communicated and taken into account when the closure notice was, when it actually happened by Professor Sutton?
I couldn't speak as to what he took into account, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Garlick, for your appearance here today. As I mentioned, we will provide you with a transcript of this hearing. Please have a look at it carefully, make sure that you haven't been misheard or misrepresented. Thank you to all the committee members for attending today. This ends this public hearing, and we will have another one tomorrow.